All right, should we jump into some news?
Let's get to it.
All right, so I think one of the biggest stories that we had this week, outside of the capital at least, was a new native nation, or not a new native nation, but a nation is newly looking at getting into cannabis here in Minnesota. We have the Prairie Island Indian community that's looking to open up a dispensary, and one that would be pretty big, looking at being only about 45 minutes away from the capital itself.
Yeah, it'll be our first dispensary within an hour of the metro.
Mm-hmm. No longer driving 4 hours north to be able to legally buy smokable cannabis products. Now you'd be able to, within 2 hours, be there and back, at least to the capital.
And could you pronounce the name of the shop for me?
So Island Peži.
Okay,
Peži is, so that's Dakota for grass. It's sort of become a slang term for cannabis over the years, and we can see that now become the new name of Island Peži, the Treasure Islands Dispensary.
I love that.
Yeah. Jerry, have you been to a legal dispensary in another state?
Yeah, I've been to several. Nevada primarily, but a couple other states, Michigan. My wife, they kind of take a road trip occasionally, her and some ladies, and go to Illinois.
Love that. Totally.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm personally just so excited to be able to have dispensaries open in Minnesota that aren't just selling the great edible products that we have today, but that are really focusing on like smokable THC flower.
Yes. Yeah. Like I'm really excited to see just like the size of the space and what they do with it, because I've yet to go up to the one in Red Lake.
Yeah.
So I feel like this will be a lot more accessible.
I heard the one they were at already broken ground for the addition to I think it was the Dakota gas station right there on the corner as you turn in.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's going to be pretty front and center, pretty accessible for people. I think the idea of putting it like back in an industrial zone that's like really out of the way, like they do in Illinois or Colorado, really isn't happening here at our native nations. It's really, how can we make this more accessible?
Yep.
And I think some of the folks I've talked to from the nations, kind of expressed that I don't think there's any secret that there is some illicit drug problems, and some of their residents are homeless and using illicit drugs and narcotics and opioids and stuff. And I hope that some of those folks will maybe consider using cannabis as maybe an off ramp for some of the more damaging narcotics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, could not agree more.
And it's just really nice to see more and more of our tribal nations take advantage of this head start they have before we get full adult use. Like it says, this is our fourth one now to enter the industry, and I'm really looking to the rest of them to get into it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool being in a state where there's so much acceptance, not just of cannabis in the capital, but cannabis acceptance throughout the multiple tribal nations within our state as well.
Mm-hmm. I think it really helps with putting cannabis in our rural areas, which will be a persistent problem going into the future. But
100%.
Having the tribes to bridge that gap and start early, I'm digging it.
Yeah. And now when people ask me, like, all right, I don't want to drive 4 hours. When are we going to have a close dispensary?
Even though still, shout out Red Lake.
Yeah, shout out Red Lake. Honestly, the incredible native care, like top tier.
So who are the four? So Red Lake, White
So we've
Earth?
got Red Lake, White Earth, Mille Lacs. They're the three
Mille
that so
Lacs.
far. They are building that grow facility. Haven't yet started it, but have made very clear that the cannabis industry is a future for them.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading last week that I think the Mille Lacs band of Ojibwe, the CEO of the company that's managing the cannabis, he said that they review something like 1,000 potential business ideas every year. And so that to me is just so interesting that they have that's their mindset, is they'll look at anything to see if they can bring it into their ecosystem. And obviously cannabis, a 50,000 square foot growing facility, I mean, that's taking a risk, but I don't know. What I'm really looking forward to is better understanding the Native American people, because we just don't interact with them on a regular basis. They're not a part of the people I see every day. So it's like through cannabis, we'll be able to better understand these people that are amongst us, that have been here longer than us. And I think it's going to be a really nice way to enter the cannabis industry, is to have some sympathy as well as mutual understanding of, hey, this plant is for everyone, and let's get to know each other through it.
Oh yeah, it's just expanding like that bubble of what is the cannabis community. I think for a long time, the cannabis community in my mind was like me and my friends. And then it sort of became like, all right, me and the cannabis activists. And then it became like, all right, well, me and the hemp processors, and all right, me and the hemp growers, and all right, me and the illicit growers, and like, all right, the home growers. And I think now this is just further expanding that to say, and the native nations explicitly, you also are part of the cannabis industry.
They get to teach us a lot, honestly, because of the way they get to go about their adult use. Like, we can find, I think, a lot of lessons in their success.
Yeah, 100%.
I think the other thing that we'll be able to identify is some of the fail points as well.
Yeah.
So anytime you do something kind of on the bleeding edge, we can pretty easily recognize the fail points early on. Another nation that's done a ton with cannabis is the Lower Sioux, primarily hemp. And so they've got a super cool pilot program. And you guys, I think you might even have talked about this once, where they're doing hemp greenhouses for people on their reservation. One of the coolest programs I've ever been able to see up close and in person.
Yeah, truly, I think this is one of those multi-use plants that the multi-use part of it is often forgotten, but really seeing how it's been adopted by everyone, but Native Nations included, has just been really cool over the past year. All right, should we move on and talk about our friends over at the Legal Marijuana Now Party?
Yes, we should.
All right,
what's going on with them?
So you might remember a couple weeks back, maybe a month or two back, we talked about some news that the DFL had petitioned to have the major party status of the Legal Marijuana Now Party essentially overturned, recognizing that some of those minimum requirements to be a major party that they did not meet. Now, we should say the Legal Marijuana Now Party has said, no, we do meet those minimum qualifications. But what we saw come out today is that the Minnesota Court of Appeals is saying, actually, we believe no. So we had a judge here issue a recommendation towards the Supreme Court. They ultimately get to make the final decision on this and whether they're going to grant the petition. But it's looking like it's moving in the direction that very soon the Legal Marijuana Now Party will no longer be a major party here in Minnesota.
Wow. I think I should read DFL Chair Ken Martin's quote.
Absolutely, please do.
I think he put it pretty. He's pleased that the court's pleased with the finding of the court's recommendations, is after years of gamesmanship and chicanery, the district court's findings make it clear that the Legal Marijuana Now Party is not a major political party and should not be afforded the benefits that come with that status. So, pretty clear indictment there from the DFL himself.
Oh, yeah.
Is this collusion?
So, my interpretation on this from the last couple of election cycles is I think maybe early on, Legal Marijuana Now had kind of the right, they were doing things for the right reasons. And but I think there were some bad actors that co-opted a large chunk of that. And, they put up some candidates that were, less than stellar. And, I think at this point, it's probably the right move to just say, okay, we've got legal marijuana now. Let's move along.
Yeah.
I think, exactly what you said. Like, because the DFL delivered the cannabis bill, like, I don't think anyone will have a massive problem with this, but also it was down to the party itself to make sure they had all their ducks in a row. So it's really self-inflicted error, but it took the DFL's pushing to get them off. But it's not like
and that's sort of that's like the strangest thing is that if they had all of those conventions, if they sort of checked the minimum boxes, this wouldn't necessarily even be a problem. It's just that they submitted they submitted documentation once saying we didn't have it, and this again saying we didn't have it, and the third time said we had all of these conventions all in the same day, all within the same hour, in an insane amount of places in counties and congressional districts and
up and down the state.
Yeah, all at the same time. And I think this is the court looking at that and saying, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah. But like all in all for the cannabis industry, I don't think this is a big deal.
No. I agree with you, the point that you said, Jerry, that like, going back to some of the people that started this party originally, really dedicated activists that have been working for this for decades. I mean, shout out to Oliver's, shout out to so many people. Like the list of people would be
the people who
so
inspired
long.
us, to stay in this, honestly.
And the other thing is the DFL has a valid concern that as long as the Legal Marijuana Party now is in existence and is considered a major party, they have a drawdown of votes from the DFL.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's the reality.
Ballot power, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they found election after election that having the phrase legal marijuana now on the ballot, people see that and they say, yeah, I do want that. And I'm excited for a future where we're voting more on the party line. I mean, I can't say that, but
if a one issue party gets their issue, there we go.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah,
I agree.
yep. So
I wonder are they going to be on the ballot this year though?
So the recommendation is that the court should review this in time to make sure that they're not on that November ballot. It's a really short timeline. Yeah. So curious to see more about that.
Maybe we can still vote for, what's her name, for president.
Oh, should we even say her name? I feel bad.
Crystal?
Yeah, Crystal. Yeah, so, shout out to Crystal, friend of the podcast.
Crystal.
Yeah.
I saw her on the primary ballot.
Yeah. I almost voted for her. Almost. All right. Well, so I think the biggest story that's coming out this week is out of St. Paul. There's a lot of news that happened very quickly on that side of cannabis. If you listen to our Monday episode, you probably heard us say there's not been a lot of hearings scheduled. There's one scheduled for the OCM bill, and that's sort of it. Well, that's changed.
Yeah, if you listen to our last podcast, too, I called it this week, first hearing.
You... Allegedly.
Well, on Wednesday at Earl Giles, Kayla was saying that next week is Weed Week at the Capitol.
Monday, though.
Yeah.
Massive day. What is that, the 25th?
Yeah, that is the 25th. Yeah, in the Commerce Committee at 1 p.m.
They're hearing many weed bills.
But let's talk about the hearing that. Yeah. So we had some pretty big hearings today. So it was supposed to be just sort of more of an informational hearing from the OCM, hearing a little bit about the main bill that they're pushing forward through Stevenson and Port. But we also heard from a lot of people within the industry. We heard some questions from lawmakers that I think sort of point us in the direction of where this might be going. And so I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that.
I'll clarify. It was informational in the House and the first hearing in the Senate.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that.
One small amendment made in the Senate.
Oh, yeah.
Very small.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we'll talk about that amendment as well. And we'll talk about the amendments that were withdrawn as well. But first, let's talk about Charlene Briner's presentation. So she presented in both the House and the Senate. I'm wanting to compare them side by side and see how many words were like the exact same in order, because obviously pretty similar stuff being presented. The two bills are the same language. Her reasoning for it is the same. So I recommend people listen to one of them. But we'll also just tell you what she said, which is she described the reasons why they think that this bill should pass. She talked about the importance of a lottery system. She talked about the importance of expanding medical access and the importance of dealing with sort of the bottleneck of licensing that we have upcoming here. Obviously, a lot of testimony that had thoughts about that, including from someone sitting in this very room. So excited to jump into that. But yeah, we should really plug that if people are wanting to get involved, listen to the full conversation, but go to that hearing on Monday. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about some of that testimony that came out. John, do you want to talk a little bit about what it was like to be back in front of committee, testifying about cannabis bills now a session later?
Hello, I'm John Barty. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee members, and thank you to Director Briner. She was great.
Oh, it was great. It was nice following Charlene. I got to go first in the House, which was nice because everything that she says is excellent. Like I really do enjoy the work that OCM's been doing. I agree with most of their proposals as well, but being in the room, it was definitely, the vibe was back of like, oh, weed. It was what I think 70% of the people in the room was. And that's like, we haven't had that yet. So it was nice to have all the jitters back. And then finally, I don't know, hearing, I was more interested in hearing the questions the legislators had and seeing how Charlene would answer those. And I think that's where a lot. So once again, go watch the hearing. I think they're very clear about what they want to do, and testifiers were very clear about their thoughts on and opinions. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll link to those in the show notes. But yeah, Jerry, a little bit about your thoughts. So John was there in the room. You were not in the room, but you obviously are very impacted by some of the legislation being looked at. What are some of your thoughts?
So I wasn't able to make it up to the Capitol. I was there last week for a different function. But so you had said that Charlene Briner thinks that the lottery system is the way to go.
Correct. Yeah.
I would disagree with that. I think that the lottery system absolutely stacks the deck in favor of multi-state operators who can basically do straw man lottery entries.
The term they were using was flood the zone.
Yeah, I mean that's what it is. So, and we've seen this in other recreational states in several instances where they choose. Lottery is an easy out for the state, but there's nothing is clear then. So we don't know. Are all of the names in there? Is the system foolproof, or have we stacked the deck? If I take this beautiful Northern Lights.
Oh yeah, beautiful, absolutely.
And I put 5 names in there, and they're all Tanner. Guess whose name I'm going to pull, right? So the lottery system, to me, I think really. So for small business persons and especially for equity candidates, I think that basically cuts them off at the neck. And, people can argue that, but I don't see that there's any other way that deck doesn't get stacked in favor of people that are essentially have deeper pockets.
Totally fair. And that's why we're excited to have both of you guys here today, is because we get to sort of not mirror the hearing that was had earlier, but to sort of share some of the comments that I think represent our industry. Is it's not a single, here's the exact measure that we could pass, but really sort of looking at what's the best way to roll out. So,
especially with our laws that are, what do you call them? Quirky?
Yeah, our quirky, unique Minnesota
Minnesota
program.
laws here. Part of my testimony was really clarifying that a lot of work went into the merit-based system that we have, a lot of feedback, just like a lot of stakeholder engagement overall went into these, and we want that high bar. Like, we want a system that is like rigid for ourselves, and we think from all the feedback I'm getting is like putting it into what will essentially be a random lottery. Like, one thing I was hearing today is like, what happens when we have all of these out-of-state people making straw man applicants, and there wasn't a straight answer to that, and I don't think we'll find one anytime soon, and I think that's where a lot of the fear draws from. But I should say, Charlene Briner, Director Briner, made it very clear that to get in the lottery, you do have to pass the formula that they set out in the merit-based system. So we'll be making sure you check all those boxes, and then you're in the lottery, which that is a protection, but I think we need to add many more protections.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, because you could get a lawyer to
that's St. Paul speak right there, and we all know it. And I'm fine with Charlene Briner. I think she's trying to do an extraordinarily difficult job right now, but we all know that if I put out so much as one Facebook post or an Instagram post or a Snapchat or anything, I can have 100 people that meet those qualifications. And for a very small sum of money, people will put their name on a piece of paper, period.
You can get a law firm to make the application.
Right.
That's going to hit and that's like the fear. Like, these guys can have a boilerplate application, give it to 1,000 people, and they have 1,000 tickets in the game. So I just want to see more from OCM, honestly, and what protections are we putting in to avoid these outcomes that we've seen in other states? And that's really what I'm looking for.
Stop trying to take the easy way out.
What would you guys say to someone who says that the license caps are sort of that protection, that because you can only hold so many licenses, that there's sort of this requirement that, people can apply for 40, 50 licenses if they want, but at the end of the day, they're only walking away with 3.
Well, they're taking space in that lottery then. They're taking space from people who may qualify who just couldn't get it together for that. It's just, with the lottery, there's only so much room. And we need to make sure a majority of that room goes to the people who are trying to get it to.
Fair, totally fair.
And from my perspective, there is very little, if any, clarity on exactly how that lottery system would play out. And I mean, I've seen it in other rec states, and we know exactly what happens and has happened historically, and I don't think there's any way that you can justify it other than taking the easy route.
What I've seen is everyone's willing to be convinced. We just haven't heard enough. And we haven't heard enough for why this is actually the best thing for the state, because we have a unique system here. We have a weird system. We have many current operators who have been selling THC long before the bill went through. How do we get those people in to build that successful industry from the jump is the question, and the answers, I think, come from the industry.
Totally. Well, just to push back one more time, because we've heard a lot of comments online, and I think it's helpful to sort of have this dialogue and really explain some of the arguments that people have against the measures and perhaps for, and sort of talking about the
I'll also
divide
say 90% of those proposals are amazing. They make the process easier. They better the bill from what we had last year. It's like this aspect of it, of like flipping our licensing system, adding to our licensing system in this way feels unnecessary, and if it is necessary, the burden is on them to convince the industry.
But isn't this perhaps the protection against regulators putting their hand on the weights? Perhaps we could have a regulator that's put in place that says, I really like big business, and I want to give the licenses through a merit process to the businesses that I feel are most ready, which is insert multi-state operator names here. We don't want to get sued. But, what sort of would your pushback be to someone who says the lottery is actually the best way to preserve social equity because we're protecting it from the hands of, bad regulators?
I would talk about long-term sustainability for these businesses. Is like, are we putting these people in a space to succeed in 5 years, or are we setting them up in a system where it's like, okay, if you get your lottery, if you get it now, by the time you start in 2 years, like competition's already eating you up because everyone, like the bigger operators are here. Like we can't avoid the bigger operators. Like that's business. Cannabis is a business. Like out-of-state operators are going to come here and they're going to do well. But it's what can we do from the jump, from the very beginning to protect people, and people don't feel protected by a lottery. Yeah, it's.
So maybe you've forgotten this whole process a little bit, but those same people that claim that they're doing things in our best interest, even from the party that got this bill passed, were the same ones that just a few years ago were telling us all, the cannabis user community and the growing community, the clandestine folks that have been around a little while, that we should all be in prison. They didn't just miraculously change their mind on that. They see the dollar signs.
I think that's such a great comment. Yeah. Well, we're going to take a very short break here. And when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the testimony that we heard, and then also jump into how people can get involved on that hearing on Monday. We'll be right back. Oh, it's getting cutthroat now.
Hey guys, what are you up to?
Oh, we're just practicing for the Canna Connect 4 tournament, getting ready.
The Canna Connect 4 tournament? What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's the expo. All the brands are going to get together. They're going to compete in Connect 4. We want to show that we're the best in the industry, so we're practicing. And Marcus is getting really good.
Like Northern Lights, like you guys think Canna Connect 4 is like a Connect 4 tournament? Oh! Guys, Canna Connect 4 is a conference and expo. It's not a Connect 4 tournament. We're bringing together like 20 to 25 brands to give out like samples and education and knowledge about the Minnesota cannabis industry. It has nothing to do with Connect 4.
But we just haven't heard anything about it.
That's my fault, and I apologize. But we're getting the word out about Canna Connect 4 starting today, and tickets are on sale. In fact, I'm giving away 150 free tickets. Like, you guys got to get your tickets quick.
Oh,
Yeah.
guess we should stop practicing and go get our tickets.
Let's get the hell out of here and grab our tickets.
All right, let's go.
April 5th through the 7th, Modest Brewing and the Wilderness. Get your tickets online, cannaconnectmn.com.
And we're back. So in this second part of the segment, we're going to dig into a little bit of that testimony and then also talk about what people can do to get involved, looking at next week and onward at the session. So it was sort of a who's who of the cannabis industry at the Capitol today. And also you'll notice sort of a who's who of former Northern Lights guests. So we had John Barty, I mean, not former Northern Lights guest, but John Barty was first up there. Angela Dawson, someone who's been on the podcast, Aaron Wallach, Jeff Brinkman, really some awesome people that are making moves in the industry. Calanda, Reverian, really some cool people.
Hollis Winston for Hollies. Am I pronouncing?
Oh yeah. Not a former guest of ours, but yeah, really some
Mayor of Brooklyn Park, really involved in the cannabis policy right now, which I really like to see. Like one of our city leaders and not someone from League of Minnesota Cities, like actually physically down there. He's really stood out to me, and we connected a little bit after.
He made very clear he was not there as a mayor, just as a guy, but
himself, Mr. Winston.
But there was a special amount of attention on African American and BIPOC people today.
I was going to say, I also spoke with Nathan Young from the Minnesota Black Chamber of Commerce. Younger guy, understands, like being a black man in a legal state. It's like you cannot forget everything that we've gone through in the past. So just, seeing a lot of people of color down there, getting that perspective heard, Angela bringing our farmer and woman of color perspective. I think the legislators really got to see how expansive our industry is right now. It was the first time, people actually got to come down. So
it's really grown.
It's grown,
Yeah, there was some really cool testimony, hearing from people who are concerned about sort of that timeline. You know, Jeff Taylor from Beeswax was talking through, like, logistically, if I was to plant a seed today, or if I were to get a license today, how long would it be before I had a product?
To say that timeline, setting it up is very important to keep hammering to OCM. Like, man, like with these rules, realistically, when are we opening dispensaries? Like, let's be open and honest about all this. Yeah, so it's good.
Yeah, a lot of comments on that lottery system. A lot of sort of mentioning how that's not something that's going to allow small business to get in, allow the large business to create all these straw applicants. Really, I think that was definitely the thing that stood out most to me, is people making comments about that lottery and about how that would harm their business or the people that we really want to be part of this industry.
And an interesting one was Maren Schroeder and the CEO of Vireo.
Yeah, so she testified in the Senate. So that was Amber Shrimpa.
Amber Shrimpa, yeah. So it was like one person from the medical business side and one person from the patient protection side saying very similar things. I think I found that really good, to be honest, because it's like, okay, our patients and their providers want the same thing, much like how our business owners and our, let's say, enthusiasts all want the same thing here. So we really can put it together if we keep talking.
Yeah, I thought Maren's argument was interesting. We don't want our two medical operators to become our industry. We don't want that to take over like the entire cultivar and people growing here in Minnesota. But we are wanting people to continue to have access to their medicine, especially as we transition over to whatever our future industry looks like.
And we've made our medical system so much more accessible. So it's like,
have we though?
Honestly,
more than it was.
Yeah,
in
a
its
lot
inception.
more than it was. Like they took away the fee and they added. I think now it's just like you got to talk to your doctor and you can get on the medical.
Almost. So there is
It's still qualifications, but what are we at? 8 locations right now.
We're at 16 throughout the state, 1 per congressional district per business.
Okay, so 16
still is not a lot, not enough.
No, I mean it takes 1,600 to come close, and I would argue that Maren's saying the same thing from the the medical consumer side. I guarantee you that those two companies, those large MSOs, don't echo her sentiment that we don't need medical to get bigger, right? I mean, that's they have an obvious goal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Is not a nonprofit organization. They're around to make money, and that is sort of the point of business generally, and we can see that especially true here in the cannabis industry.
And we know they won't be nearly enough for that whole first year. Like that whole first year, we're going to have to get other cultivators going.
Yeah.
Sooner than later, I would argue. I mean, you can't have so say January 1 is the kickoff date. So is that the kickoff date for growers too? Because then we're going to have Illinois.
So, and that's what they've been talking about is, so let's say hypothetically, we get this early licensure, applications are rolling out as written in the bill today. We still wouldn't see people starting to grow until early parts of next year. Adding that timeline on, we're not going to have shops opening with like actual product until middle part of the year, maybe that second half of the year. Yeah. And that's, not really accounting for like the stream of commerce that has to be set up and all of this to really be created. It's I'm interested to see how they think it's going to be opening in March.
Quickly running out of time to hit that March 25.
Oh yeah,
best
not a deadline.
Best recreational legalization in the country,
in the nation. Figuring it out one day at a time.
Yeah, I remember us making bets on like, all right, so January of 2025, before or after, and now it's like, all right, well, March of 2025, before or after, and now it's like, all right, well,
June 25.
Yeah.
So there was a legislator who, I'm not going to call out on the podcast, but he literally did this to me. He said, if Immaculate Conception happens on day one,
it's God's doing. I love Immaculate Conception and candidates because they're all they
it
all
just happened.
They're like, yeah, okay.
I don't know where 300 pounds came from.
Who could have thought?
Who's to say?
Yeah, so we did have some commentary coming from the representatives themselves, which was interesting to sort of get some of those early comments from other people on the committee. Representative Brinley said that really she had a concern that the lottery doesn't allow the state to ensure that businesses are actually ready to operate. Basically, you can roll out a license, but if you look at she mentioned one business particularly. She wouldn't say him by name, but she's like, I've looked at a number of applications, and one was a lot better than the other ones, and I think that person should get a license. In the lottery system, who knows who would get a license? So interesting comment from there. And then also Representative Coito Wilthurst, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, said that maybe we could have sort of like a hybrid where if you qualify as a social equity applicant, maybe you get like a couple extra additions similar to like trying to get into a Spanish immersion school. What are your thoughts?
Katsia with Thune.
Katsia with Thune?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Took me a while too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The hybrid merit lottery is in my, if I may editorialize.
Please, that's why we're here.
Is I think where we're going to end up something closer to a merit-based system that if we have too many equal applications will be put into a lottery. I think just bringing everyone's attention to there are not enough protections, like as written, not enough protections to go through with the lottery system is like I think was the best thing about today is like we had multiple voices coming from multiple different backgrounds, uncoordinated, saying, hey, we don't like this. So I think that hybrid system or just full merit system is where we'll end up. And I applaud Representative Katsia Wattoon for being, for thinking out loud in the hearing, being like, okay, this is clearly something people want change. What can we do? Because we're going to have to get creative. That should be the fun part.
What's the big fear with issuing probably more licenses than the market will hold?
I think the biggest fear, at least that's been told to us, is that they don't want something that happens similar out west, where you have a ton of product that suddenly there's so much product that the price falls down to the point that it's not really a profitable business anymore. And all of these businesses that were created are sort of gulfed up by the big multi-state operators that can bear through that loss. Whereas a small business, maybe if your price per pound drops significantly, that's it for you.
And I know there's some fear too, when that happens with small businesses, that they'll start selling back to the illicit market, and then we'll be fueling the illicit market through the regulated market.
So over-regulation, that happens already. So again, without mentioning any names, if I grow 500 pounds and it fails testing, where do you think that goes?
Amen.
Like, I'm willing to talk about some stuff that people don't want to talk about.
That is persistent around the country.
100%. Yeah. Everybody has a black market guy they go to when they fail because they're not going to take a zero.
That's why we need, at first, people who are ready to succeed. people who are ready to cultivate, ready to get this thing going. And that's the only way, really.
And I think a lot of those people already exist.
Bingo.
And, I mean, I don't necessarily think that you should give them a head start, but I think they have to be one of the top qualifying candidates. I mean, if you've been in the game, even coming from the black market side and then moved already to the legal market with the hemp derived and the low dose, I think that has to count for something.
Yeah.
And that's self-serving, admittedly. I mean,
but wouldn't it be crazy if we rewarded our good actors?
Weird.
Wouldn't it be crazy?
Crazy. Well, so we do know that a number of legislators listen to this podcast, or they go on YouTube and watch it. So if you guys could say just like a comment or two that you really want to be dug into the heads of lawmakers that are looking at these measures, what sort of would you want the big takeaway to be at how they can reform our bill, this bill, or the current program to make it more sustainable and equitable for businesses?
I think more stakeholder engagement is always the answer for that. Like, the more experiences you can hear, the better you can kind of see these outcomes as you craft the policy.
What about you?
Is there, which one of these right here?
Oh, yeah, right there. Yeah.
For all of our legislators, stop trying to reinvent the wheel. Keep it simple. Everything we do in Minnesota, for as long as I've followed Minnesota politics, which is longer than I'd really care to admit, we take a model that's nice and round. We're like, oh, that's a good wheel. And then by the time we get sausage ground in St. Paul, we take that wheel and we go, well, if we just took this edge off and this edge off and this edge off and this edge off, we would have a better wheel because we're going to do it better than everybody else on the planet. And that mentality has screwed up so many things in Minnesota. And they overcomplicate it, and then they go out and they push a square wheel out, and then eventually, think the licensing system that Minute decided that they were going to build better than. Okay.
Minlars.
Yeah. Yep. It still doesn't work right. I mean, it works better. So eventually, after you drag it around a few thousand rotations, it starts to get round again. But there's no reason to overcomplicate it that way. Just stop. We have all of the evidence we need. We have all of the models that we need. We went and we looked at what they thought were the top 2, 3, 4, whatever. And we were going to build this perfectly round wheel with no bobbles, no check marks, no nothing out of it. And then here we are again. Today, next Monday, we're going to start taking those nice round edges off and making it square again. And there's no need for it. And I would echo John's, listen, we've lived it. Whether it's black market, whether it's gray market, whether it's the low dose hemp based, we've all lived it. We've done it. We grow cannabis, we consume cannabis, we sell cannabis. Sure. We're in it forever. We're not going away, and we shouldn't be penalized, and they should listen to us because we do know what consumers are looking for. We do know who in the game is legitimate and who's not, and we don't need multi-million-dollar MSOs coming to save the cannabis industry from us. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I'll say, let's watch Maryland right now. It's a good place to watch. They just did their lottery system, I think a few days ago, or early this week. Yeah, that's just a good example of what we might be facing here.
So, predictions for Maryland then? You willing to offer your opinion?
I'm just going to say they had 1,700 people apply for 180 licenses.
Right. And so now we'll be able to see who gets those licenses, right? And there's going to be some equity candidates that get the nod, right?
Yeah, their first round I think was mostly
social. So there's going to be some equity candidates that get the nod. There's going to be some existing small businesses or people that have been in business, at like retail businesses for a while that may get the nod. But I will go out on a limb and make a prediction that you're going to see a huge number of those licenses go, maybe as straw men in the beginning, but they will end up just like our Minnesota medical program. They will end up large MSOs, out of state ownership.
Fair. Well, I'm excited to be able to watch sort of how that industry evolves, but also how the hearings here in Minnesota goes. So let's talk about how people can continue to get involved. So John, as you mentioned, that Senate hearing today wasn't just an informational hearing. That was actually moving that bill along forward. So that's been now re-referred to agriculture. So we don't have the exact date of that, but we should have that in the next couple of days here. Excited to see sort of where that continues to go, especially as they address those agricultural side of the bills.
I think they have 6 more after agriculture, and then back to commerce.
Oh, the committee go round begins again.
Right.
And then in the House, it was just an informational committee here in the Commerce Committee. So they will be back there on Monday with a whole slew of bills looking at some that we've talked about here on the podcast. So House File 3766, or the Caregivers Expansion Bill. House File 3760, or that Med Patient Protection Bill. House File 4195, the Medical to Tribal Pilot Program. House File 4789, the Expanded Patient Definition. House File 4251, the OCM is prohibited from approving products bill. And then House File 4029, which is that impaired edible sales are illegal. If you want to hear more information about that, you can check them out on the House website, or you can go and listen to previous episodes where we've talked about all of them. So those will be coming up in the hearing on Monday, and then everything will be coming back on Wednesday when the Cannabis Omnibus Bill will be going back to Commerce. So Stevenson talked about this as he was wrapping up the hearing today. They're going to be having more of an informational session on Monday. Wednesday is when they're going to put it all together in a package that they hope to be able to pass out of committee and move forward to the next step in the committee go-round.
So get your voice heard by Monday, Wednesday at the latest.
Mm-hmm. So, John, you testified today at the House and also in the Senate. If you are recommending to someone they're wanting to make their voice heard, they're wanting to go to the Capitol, how do they actually go about getting involved?
There's a lot of ways to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the easiest way is just email your legislator.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think they're totally spot on. So, like, starting at, like, the easiest point, written testimony.
Yeah.
Super easy. You can email it to your legislator. You can email it to the committee legislative aid.
Yep.
Lots of people that you can get that information to. That's like a basic way, but let's be honest. How many of those legislators read all of those letters?
Not too many.
Yeah, not too many of them.
It's a numbers game.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've done some rights work with a different part of my life, and the numbers are what matter. You know, like some people get really super duper caught up in writing this super great, heartfelt, you know, like their life's experience in whatever their topic is, and you know, unfortunately.
To a file.
Yeah, it hits a file, but the size of that file is what matters. So if you feel passionately about something, absolutely send an email and leave voicemails for your House rep or your senator or others that may be key committee chairs and stuff like that.
City manager.
Yep, city managers, county commissioners, city council, all of those elected folks, send those emails, make those phone calls, leave those voicemails. Just understand that it doesn't necessarily take, an entire 38-page essay to get your point across.
Yeah, I think you're correct. It's way more effective to type something up for you and all your friends and neighbors, and you all send it, than it is to, like, get into the weeds of how you feel. Mm-hmm. It's just like, keep it short, keep it sweet, and multiply it. And if that doesn't work for you, excuse my language.
No.
Almost dropped the first one.
Freaking show up.
There we go.
And that's the other deal.
Up.
So if you show up to the House or Senate chamber or a committee hearing room or something like that, like we've all been in them where there's like us and 3 other people, right? Mm-hmm. And we're like, yeah, this isn't going to go anywhere. Because we're the only 3 people that really feel seriously about that, whatever that issue may be. Mm-hmm. But we've also been into them where it is like nut to butt as far as you can see. There's people standing in the doorways. The doorways are wide open. There's people in the hallways. Those are the ones that, one, tend to hit the local news circuits and the newspapers, but they also are the ones that legislators tend to pay, in my experience, pay a lot of attention to.
Most attention, yes.
Yep.
Like they have the most eyes at those. They usually, they feel that same energy. Mm-hmm. So when you hear of a big hearing, like guys, like it does a lot for like guys like me who are there. to have people show up, even if you're not testifying, to give your support, to talk to the legislators before and after. Like, I always tell people, like, they are people in the end, people who have minds and feelings that can change. And like most people, they take most seriously the people who are in their face. Like, they take that face-to-face most seriously.
And
So-
if you know, like, if you really want to get legislative stuff done, if you don't have at least your House representative and your senator's cell phone number on your phone, you're not as serious about it as
As
you
you
like to
think.
claim.
Because, like I said, they are people. They got cell phone. It's honestly,
Yeah.
that is a great point,
Yep.
Cherry. Like,
And it's a voting block. So, I mean, on most issues, every person that shows up, every person that writes a letter, the math is you count as 4 people. And so if 100,000 people send essentially the same snippet of I feel strongly about House file or Senate file, whatever, and then there's 100,000 of them, they're looking at 400,000 people. That's huge numbers. And what do we got? 3.7 million?
Yeah.
That's
We-
a large chunk.
We used to always say back in the campaign days, imagine if every single cannabis consumer in Minnesota just called their lawmaker once to say, hey, we want legal cannabis. Yeah. Now we need those people. We need people in the industry making those same calls to say, hey, we really want to be able to protect what our cannabis industry looks like and make sure that it looks how we want it to here in Minnesota.
And if you own a cannabis business, talk to your customers.
Yeah.
Help them understand what's happening. You know, like, everybody kind of assumes now that, well, I'm just going to be able to buy recreational marijuana here come January-ish, right? Like, that's the assumption, is that the state is the bottleneck, which they are. But, the assumption is we're just good to go. And that is not the case. There are so many moving pieces, and there will be for several more sessions that can really positively or negatively impact our legal marijuana laws.
Yeah.
something Senator Porter always says is, we ended alcohol prohibition however so many years ago, yet we have an alcohol bill every year, so we should expect the same for cannabis. Like, it's
Absolutely.
going to be it will be every year, that we will just make that contact, tell them what you believe, and if you really care, keep doing it.
All of these elected folks are there to do a job for their constituents. And, so I apologize to some of my friends that are elected officials, but I view them as employees, essentially. They are, they just happen to work in St. Paul. And so, like, when I have expectations about things, at the very least, I expect them, when I call, you're going to come, we're going to go have coffee or whatever the case may be, and you're going to at very least listen. And you do have to work with people that may not be in a party that super supports whatever idea you're talking about. And it's sometimes the best thing you can get out of a legislator is just for them to go get coffee when a vote happens.
We've had an advocate / lobbyist who has been talking with all of the Republican members who are going to be hearing their bill, not for their votes, but just to make sure they understand what's happening so that they don't come up with distracting questions.
Right.
Like, so just to make the process smoother. And I was telling her, I was like, that is, if you can't get meetings with the one guys, get meetings with the others. Like, it always helps.
And I really want Lindsay Port's green jacket. Like, it's become iconic now. I might wear that. So we're going to start selling that. No, just kidding. All right.
You have to move to Albert Lea and join our Chamber of Commerce. If you're a chamber ambassador, you get yourself a shiny green jacket.
All right. Well, I've never thought I would be a Chamber of Commerce kind of guy, but I think this green jacket might be the reason why.